Just a few little announcements before we get started. First of all, I did take your mock scores and whatever you told me to do with them, I did. Okay, so
oh girl,
that was like Tuesday night or something. So they've been in there for a while. So if you messaged me about it, then I did it. I mean, if you did the form, then I did it. If you see that I didn't do it and you sent a form, then you might want to let me know that somehow I missed you or something. But I was doing it based on the Unit 6 tests. And so basically, you didn't have one. So I had to use, so I think I got everybody because I was based on Unit 6 tests. So if something seems awry with that Unit 6 test, your final, anything like that, let me know. Okay, the other thing, you might have holes in your grade book if you had a late free response Friday or something like that. I have a stack of them. That's on my list to do. If you don't see that fill in by say Wednesday next week, after I have another day to just sit and work on grades, then let me know. Okay. But other than that, your grade book should be relatively complete at this time. You're going to have a mascadent. So I said, you're going to have a mascadent in your mask. All these mascadent. So the only thing we have left to go in after I get all the little late grades or, missing, quarantined, everything else grades poked in where they go. The only thing we have left is the survivor test, which is just, our way of having a good time, doing some team building thing, doing some STEM challenges, just kind of enjoying life together. And hey, wow, meanwhile, you have an opportunity to get a 109 test, so kind of a bonus little round there. So that's coming up and that'll go in next week. Did you have it, Justin?
Yeah. Are you still doing the quiz drops?
I will, but I have to finish putting in all those free responses first. So as soon as I get all the free responses put in, I will send out a thing and say, okay, now you can complete your quiz drop. So don't go to your quiz drop and put you want to drop stuff yet. Wait until I give the go ahead. Because I just have to verify that because one of the rules is you can't use zeros. So I have to verify that all zeros are taken care of. Any late work is actually just, in a stack and not there. Okay. But it'll probably be around Wednesday of next week. The last, worst case scenario, it'll be like Monday after our test for that week. I'll just be like, okay, turn it in and go for it. So then we're done. I mean, really, honestly, many of you are done with your grades right now. Yes, you will probably do the survivor challenge just because it's fun and you can't miss that whole week anyway because you don't have enough absences to. And so you'll just do it, play, have a good time, get a grade. Many of you already have the grade you want. And so you're good. But some of you still have a little bit to do. And so you'll be playing the survivor challenge to actually try to get an A in the class. And so, and it can, it's a test grade. So it can move it about a percentage and a half or so. So if you're sitting right there, that's where you need to be. Okay. Yeah. Did you do your Christmas? Did you do your Christmas little video?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got some drops. Okay.
So
you're
how
good.
much will the quiz drops be?
I don't know. It depends on how bad your quizzes were.
If
If you got a 90 on your quiz, ain't going to change much. If you got a 25 on your quiz, it might make a difference. So I don't know.
You get 2 quiz drops?
You have 2 if you did that Christmas assignment, the book review or whatever, or movie or.
But you have to use on a 0 if you have one.
You have to do well, and of course that brings your grade up too.
Yeah.
So yes, but you have to actually do the work. Yeah. And so I don't just let you have drop zeros. You have to actually do whatever that assignment was. So this one, I'm going to just put edges on the paper because this one is crazy. It is, let me just show you what mine ended up looking like maybe. Yes, here it is. This is the hot mess sketch notes. This is not for people with OCD. I'm going to show my little video people. There you go, video people. Okay. No, I'm videoing because I accidentally shifted my camera during first hour to show them a side over here, and then I never shifted it back. And so it's like 40% of the thing, they can't even see anything. I was like, oh, whoopsie. I have to redo that. Okay, another thing. Great news. On the mock, I'm going to run out of time if I don't stop talking. Great news on the mock. I did all the number crunching yesterday. 88% of my students that are testing for the AP biology test took the mock, which is, first of all, really, really high. That leaves, I think there were like 6 people that are taking the AP Bio test that didn't take the mock, so that's pretty crazy. Of the 88%, 90% of people passed. So that's crazy. That's super crazy high, which means in a COVID year with hybrid instruction and insanity all around, you guys still like worked your butts off and you made sure that you have the knowledge that you needed to do well. And I don't know how the actual test will go. You never know. Good day, bad day, mediocre day. Nobody ever knows. How hard is the test? I heard the calculus test was like from the devil. Like they were like, that was so hard. Yeah, like everybody has said that. Like every single person I have heard from, people that had 36s on their ACTs and National Merit Scholars said that was a hard test. So if we have a hard test, then I don't know. All bets are off. But right now I'm looking at you guys are going to do really, really well. So that's good, which means, I am going to get your hopes up because I'm going to boost your confidence. So it never works for you. So that just means to me that even if you just yippee skippy off to college and didn't even take this test, you're choosing not to take the test, or you you have a crappy day and don't get college credit, or your college doesn't even give you credit for the test because they just don't award that. Then you still have an awesome foundational knowledge of biology. You should be really good. That means, because to me, that just shows that I just basically assessed your whole entire year's content and you guys came back with really good scores. So great job. Okay. So what we're doing here is we are going, now they call the unit natural selection is what they call it. But they have a bunch of evolution in it. So I'm going to call it evolution. I'm going to just rename their unit for them. They have a bunch of evolution that's not natural selection in it. So there's 3 words that I'm like, okay, we have got to make sure that when they ask these words on the test, that we answer them in the right way. So one of the words is fitness. Like, what makes this species, or what evidence do you have that this species is the highest fit or the best fit or has the best fitness or increasing the fitness, blah, blah, blah. What you're looking for is reproductive success, okay? So when you answer a question about fitness or best fit or fit, so anything with fit in it, make sure that you're answering the question in terms of reproductive success, right? So you could say they survive and reproduce. I know, I can assume that if they're reproducing, they survived, right? Because you kind of can't reproduce if you don't survive. However, if you say they're best fit because they're surviving well, I can't assume they're reproducing, right? You could survive and not reproduce. So you have to put the reproduction part in because I can't assume that. I can assume the survival based on reproduction. I can't assume the reproduction based on survival, okay? You guys missed that. There was free response question on the mock. That it was like when we missed it, it was because you said they'd survive, but you didn't say they would reproduce. And fitness is all about reproduction. So you got to pass your traits on to the next generation, or else they'll work. The other term, silly enough, is evolution, which I'm writing right beside evolution, so that seems redundant. So evolution is a change in alleles in the gene pool. So I want to say that because it's the whole population. It's not just one individual. So if they ask how you know something's evolved, here we go again. How you know something's evolved? Evidence of evolution. What would be a sign that it's evolved? How can you test and see if it's evolved? You guys did this one on the CIT plus question, CIT plus question on the mock. There was a bacteria that had a certain thing and it called the CIT plus, or it called it CIT negative if it didn't have it. So the CIT positive, it said, how can you provide evidence, or how can you know that evolution has occurred? Most of you said this, and you know what I did whenever I was taking the test with you? That's the first thing I said too. I said, I'll know that evolution has occurred if the CIT positive bacteria can survive without glucose, right? They wanted a change in the alleles in the gene pool. So here's what I would do. I would cover my bases. I would say, I know it has evolved because it survived in the environment with no glucose because it had a change in its alleles, right? So now I've got both of them. Now I hit the environment and the DNA in the same sentence, and I've covered my bases. So no matter which one they're going to grade on, I've done both, okay? Because it didn't say provide 1 in all caps, and actually it still is 1, right? It still is 1 answer, even if they did, because it is what you're seeing phenotypically and the underlying cause behind it. Okay, so let's do it both. Cover your bases. And it only takes a few seconds to write those last through because change in DNA or whatever. Okay, cool. There's one more massive word that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But these are big word 1, big word 2, and there'll be a big word 3. Okay, all right, we're going to start in the beginning of evolution, and that is random, things that are random, random effects on evolution. Okay, and I'm going to call evolution Evo a lot so I can just space. One, and this is when I start drawing weird pictures, but I was just having a good time, so just bear with me, okay? So mutations are random. You cannot predict them, and you cannot really do anything about them. So in this instance, I'm drawing a little DNA. Woo. Okay, there's my DNA. It's running through my mutation word. You do whatever you want.
Well, I would, but I know it's gonna make it look really stupid on my paper because I
Just wait. Next, we're drawing a covered wagon with a horse pulling it. Yeah, there's a spot right there. Come on up. Come on up. Okay, so mutations, just a random change in DNA that you really can't do anything about, right? But it's going to cause a change in the alleles of the gene pool, potentially. Like, not all mutations cause a change. It depends. If they're a neutral mutation, you won't see them build up or change anything. But it's potential cause of that. Okay, the next one is called genetic drift. And this one is weird. This is the one that has 2 types. So now I am going to attempt to draw a covered wagon pulled by a horse for you. You can if you want, but you don't have to if you don't want to. I was having some fun with this yesterday when I was about to leave. Here's my covered wagon. There it is. Here's its wheels. Here's its horse. Oh, geez. I swear my art friends are going to be. It's maybe a fat horse. Probably going to have dysentery because it's on the Oregon Trail.
Miniature ponies.
There we go.
I have obese chickens. They're so cute.
Here he is. Ha!
That's fun.
Founder's effect. That's what he is.
So if we aren't drawing the horse,
You try Founder's effect. Founder's effect without a horse is a sad, sad Founder's effect. Okay, remember Founder's effect, if you need to put a little parentheses or some little example so you remember beside it, this was the blue people of Kentucky. Do you remember that? Whenever there was a little group that moved up into the mountains of Kentucky, and within that group there was a genetic mutation that made their skin look blue. And so they they went from a large population where perhaps that blue mutation was like maybe 0.1% of the population into a small population where it was like, say, 2 to 10%. I don't know, it depends on how many went with them, right? Okay, you can see how that would spread through that population quite rapidly and cause a change in the alleles in that population. Where if it's just looking at like 1% or 0.1% of the population, you're not really going to see a big difference in those populations. It's going to take too long to spread through, okay? So, and the deal with Founder's effect and the bottleneck effect, which is the other one. Here's my bottle. Bottleneck. There it is. Doot, doot, doot. Bottleneck effect is the one where you have like, I had to kind of make it where it's not going to squeak into my other things. So both of these are genetic drift, by the way. Okay. Bottleneck effect is one where you have like some natural disaster that narrows your population down. And it's like, well, it's not because they were faster, bigger, stronger, better fit. It's because the meteor didn't land on them, right? That's why they survived. And so now you have changed the alleles in your population just by the fact that you bottlenecked it. I mean, that it went from a big population to, oh, geez, all of them died. So then you have a different kind of gene pool than you did before, okay? It's going to affect your population. And then I put a third one under here, under mutations here. And it's called migration. And I'm just going to draw some little birdies around it. Woo. Oh, that was like a 3. Okay. All right. So these random effects on evolution are things that kind of get the process started. Okay. How can we have a changing population? How can we have a change in the alleles in our gene pool if we don't ever have any changes? So here are some changes, and that's kind of how you can. Now, there's a different way, too, that we'll talk about as well. But these are just random things that can happen that you have no control over. Migration, basically, why is this one? Because you have genes coming in from outside and you have genes leaving, and you don't really have any control over which one's in and which one's out. They're just, hey, welcome to the party, you know, whatever. Okay? All right, so then after you get this happening, then natural selection takes over. And this is kind of the big one. This is the one you know very well. So there's kind of two little things I like to talk about. First of all, we talk about selective forces. Selective forces, and they're either positive forces or negative forces. So basically, it's your environment selection. So is the mutation that popped in, is the migration that happened here, is the genetic drift that went on, does the environment support that change, or does it select against that change? And then you'll start to see your best fit, reproductive success, your best fit organisms kind of start to reproduce more, and then you'll have more of their genes, and then you'll see evolution occur, and that's all coming together. Okay? Good? Okay, the other thing that I wanted you to remember about this, I'm forgetting everything. I have to look at my little cheat sheet I made, is that this acts on the phenotype. Okay. That means the characteristic. Like natural selection, nature is not like, I do not like the heterozygous DNA, right? No, it's like, I do not like the coloration that stands out. Like that's natural selection. So it's on the color of the mouse or the color of the little peppered moth on the different trees or whatever. So it's acting on the phenotype that natural selection does, okay? All right, so let's take a trip over here. And now we're talking about these selective forces, and we have two types of evolution right here. So two types of evolution. I'm going to write them sideways because I'm just having a great time being weird on this particular sketch note. I think I got bored or something with all this like little segments. So I have convergent evolution. I'm going to pretend that my species were like right here, and then as time goes on up, you know, that's kind of what you're seeing here. So we have changes in evolution. Changes in the gene pool happening. Evolution is happening. And convergent means you have species that are changing side by side. So on this one, I'm going to put a little butterfly up here. There he is. Okay. And I'm going to put a little bird here, although I kind of have trouble drawing birds. Unless they're just like those little M-shaped birds. Okay, there he is. Okay. So they both have wings because they have the same environment, right? They're both taking to the skies or the air. So that's their niche. So they have the same environment. So their evolution is convergent. I don't like drawing them converging. Like you think of roads converging, like coming together. I don't like drawing them like that because students will think that it's like they're going to become one species. No, they're not. Okay, note to self, to you, never, ever, 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 ever say that two species will become one. It never, literally never happens. You know, I said there's an exception to rules. There's not an exception to this one. Two species never become one species. Okay, it just cannot happen, huh? Oh, okay, just checking to make sure that you hadn't some like example of two species becoming one. And so the structures we see from this are analogous structures. Okay, so they are structures that have arisen through evolution because they have the same environment. They're not related to each other, not necessarily, not really. They just have the same environment, okay? So the other type of evolution is divergent. Divergent evolution, you start with a common ancestor and you diverge, right? And so I tried to draw some mammals and this went really badly. But we'll see what happens this time. So I'm going to draw a little square-faced dog that looks like an old-fashioned telephone right now. But anyway, there he is. Okay, and here's his little feet, and here's his little tail. There he is. Okay, so there's the dog, and here's the cat. Okay, they're both mammals. They are decently closely related, though not super close. Okay, I don't know what this cat is doing here with its body. There's his tail. Whoa. Okay, sorry, cat. I don't know what's wrong with you. There's my deformed cat. Okay, so they have similar structures like their arms, their legs, their claws, toenails, things like that, because they have a common ancestor, right? Not because of their environment. So let's think of wild dogs and cats, like hyenas or whatever, and like, I don't know, lions and cheetahs and stuff. They kind of live in the same environment even, but they're distinctly different. Like from being able to climb trees and like live up in the trees and having retractable claws that can do different things and stuff like that. They're different from each other. And so their structures we call homologous. I probably should have drawn like a dolphin and a dog. So the reason that theirs are the same is because they basically live in a different environment. I mean, I'm going to say niche. They live in a different niche. And everyone's like, isn't it niche? And I'm like, heck if I know, I call it niche. So basically they have a different role in the environment. They have a different place. And so because of that, their structures tend to change a little bit, diverge a little bit. But they have a common ancestor, so they're homologous structures, okay? So this one is divergent over here, and this one is convergent over here. All right, questions on that? So now we're getting, so this is evolution. This is evolution changing, evolution. Ooh, if we diverge enough, we might speciate, right? We might actually become where we have, so we have two, say we have one big population of some bird, and they're all living together and they're interbreeding and all the stuff that goes on. But then they start to diverge and pick a different niche. Like maybe an area has opened up that has a lot of resources. So kind of a part of the population kind of starts to move over there. And then there's one over here. And then over time, maybe we start a serious divergence until we start some speciation event. So we're going to take a little moment to look at isolations over here. So if we start to isolate our population, where we split it down the middle and start to isolate it, then we could actually end up taking a population and turning it into two species. So I'm drawing a little sperm and an egg because I don't know, that seemed fun at the time. And then zygote. I wanted you to remind you what a zygote was, right? So a zygote is a fertilized egg. The egg that we made in meiosis just the other day. Or sperm made in meiosis, right? Haploid cell has half the DNA, meets up with another one. Got a lot of genetic diversity going on here, but we call that a zygote whenever a sperm fertilizes an egg. And so you need to know that because isolations are divided into pre-zygotic and post-zygotic. You should remember these, I think. I think they're memorable enough that you probably tucked them away somewhere in your memory. Okay, pre-zygotic. How can we isolate our population before the sperm meets the egg? Like, what are some things that might isolate? What do you got? Do you remember any of them? How can we keep them apart, keep them from mating? What are some things that might get in the way of mating?
Different behaviors.
Behaviors, yes. They may not have the same dance. They may not have the same light flashing if they're a firefly. So that's what I drew on mine because I was trying to draw a bird dance and it was not going well. So I just drew a little firefly and made his butt glow. Oh, I forgot his antenna and his wing. Okay, cool. Temporal, yes. And you could literally say different schedules and still get it right. Okay, you don't have to use the fancy words. So I'm drawing a little clock on this one. And I drew little hands on it, okay? Time is not the same. So they're like ready for mating. One's in the night, one's in the day, one's in the spring, one's in the winter. Like we just never meet up on our schedules. And so it's not happening. What else?
Their parts.
Yeah. Their parts? Mechanical. Jeremy the snail. I can draw a snail. They're kind of fun to draw, actually. Okay. There's old Jeremy the snail. Looking for love, left-handed snail. And then I think someone said geographical or place. I think I heard somebody say that in the beginning. Geographical. They're just not literally together. Like, they're not there. They can't mate because they're not in the same spot. Okay. Now, post-zygotic, all right, post-zygotic is going to be how are they kept us from, how are we keeping them from coming back together? Actually, this is what this is. Like, this is why we can't ever have species come back together. because really, if they are truly a species, they can't have offspring that will continue the lineage. So we call it hybrids whenever, and I'm going to like fill in the blank. We call it hybrids whenever two species have an offspring together. So the hybrid is either what? What's wrong with the hybrid? Give me some. Infertile. Hybrid can't have babies. No way to keep the gene pool mixing if you can't have babies. So that means that hybrids are really, really not fit as far as biologic goes. Okay, they can also be too fragile to have offspring. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of stability to reproduce. And finally, they could just be dead. Hybrid inviability is the fancy word, but I'm just like, if you just write the hybrid dies, the hybrid never was born, the hybrid's still born, the hybrid just isn't living, then that works. So you don't have to say inviable. Okay, so that brings us to our third word. Our third big word is species. They can produce fertile offspring together. That's the definition of species. Okay? They are two individuals or groups of organisms that can produce fertile offspring together. Do I have to say viable? Not necessarily. Can I? Yeah, viable just means via means life. So you could say viable. They produce viable, fertile offspring. Guys, if it's fertile, it's also alive. So you don't have to say viable, but if it makes you feel better, you can. Okay? So that's kind of the deal there. So species. If they ask you how you know, it has become, or has become two different species, right? How you know speciation has occurred, you're going to talk in terms of producing fertile offspring. Either they can't, or they won't, right? So either way, they're not producing fertile offspring. This was the Firefly question on the test on the Unit 5, when it said, like it was talking about how come this whole flash pattern thing is a speciation, like a speciation, driver of speciation, or something. And you had to say, and some of you even got close, and some of you got it right, but you had to say that because the different flash patterns, the female didn't recognize it, and so she wasn't going to mate and produce fertile offspring. So did you notice how I threw in there, produce offspring? Because that's the definition of species. So make sure you do that. Change in the genes, evolution. Produce fertile offspring, species. Reproductive success, fitness. These are terms that are all over the test. You have to look and be like, what is it asking me about? How do I answer that question in the way I'm going to get the point? That's how. You do it with the actual, like what the definition of it is. And you lean towards that. A lot of you guys would give me evolution when we want species. Can we have evolutionary changes within our population and not become a different species? Yeah, all the time. Like every time people or critters or anything is born, we have change in the gene pool that doesn't all of a sudden magically make us different species. So make sure that you get those two definitions way separate, okay? Because that's evolution can be up to 20% of this test. It says it right here in paper in the standards. Evolution, natural selection, Unit 7, 13 to 20% of the test. Those words are everywhere. Make sure that you know them, okay? Cool. What was next on my list? Let's see. We got our speciation. Oh, yeah. So now it's like the next thing is like, how fast can this happen? Like, what is this whole speciation deal, evolution, big change in the population? So there's an argument between two different groups, and I would put them right here, but I know you won't be able to see that if I draw that there. So I'm going to take my needle box here and put it up here where you can see it. Okay. So this is when I switched the camera in first hour and forgot to ever put it back. And it was just sitting over there looking at that for the rest of the time. Okay, so we have two different terms. One of them is gradualism. So if I were to have a graph, and they never put it on a graph, so I'm not going to, but if I were to have a graph, it would be y-axis would be rate of speciation, how fast you're getting species, or rate of evolutionary change, if that's what they're measuring, one of the two. And then time. Okay, so gradualism is like a gradual increase in change, or a gradual gradual change in the population. So this is gradualism. And it's basically a thought that it is slow and steady. Slow and steady change. And then there was another group of people when all this evolutionary stuff started coming out, like, I don't know, 400 years ago. And they were like, no, it's like you have a static environment, like it's staying the same. And then you'll have a big change, and then a static, and then a big change, and then like that. Okay, and so these are periods of equilibrium. So that's like what they call static, like just staying the same. And these are a period of change. Okay, so they call this one punctuated equilibrium. And it's just periods of equilibrium punctuated by periods of rapid speciation. Unlike most of our political discussions, at one point, evolutionary biologists said, you know what? I think we're both right. I think it depends on the environment. If the environment is changing slowly, you will see gradualism. If, like we saw with peppered moths, with Galapagos finches, with a lot of other different things, when you have a severe environment change, like you have the peppered moss was like all the soot blew over and coated the trees so that they went from white to black. Whenever that happened, the moths that were black were camouflaged, and they hadn't been before, and the ones that were white and a little peppery color were like getting eaten by birds. And so all of a sudden you had a big evolutionary change. Now they didn't speciate, so it wasn't speciation, but it was a big change in their alleles in their gene pool. They saw the same thing in the Galapagos Islands when they were literally counting and checking on birds every single year, and there was a 3-year-long drought, and the punctuated equilibrium went nutto. That says punctuated equilibrium. Yeah.
What's the not static?
Change. So this is where you're having a big change in your alleles.
Yeah.
Change is what it says. Okay, so works if the environment's changing slow, you'll get gradualism. If the environment has a rapid change all of a sudden, you'll see punctuated equilibrium. It just depends on your environment. And so that brings me to the point of if they ask you to do an experiment, or they ask you to set up an experiment for evolution, which they do, I don't know, once every 3 or 4 years. And so you're setting up, you got your dependent variable, your independent variable, and all this stuff, and they usually want to know how long you should run it for. So I think we did a practice one like this on trichomes way back in the beginning of our class where they had plants that had little hairs sticking off of them, and you put herbivores in the field, and it said, how long should you run it for? And if you'll remember with me right now, so that you can carry it with you next week, you should run any evolutionary experiments for multiple generations. That is a cop-out because you don't have to know how long the reproductive period is because you may not know. And you know, the difference between an elephant and a mouse is huge, like 2 years to 20 days. And so you could say the wrong thing. You know, you could say, oh, it needs to run for 2 years. Well, if you're an elephant, you haven't even had your baby yet, right? So you have to run it for multiple generations. So just say multiple generations. And you could even pick a number. You could say, I'm going to have to run this for at least 20 generations, you know? And for a plant, that might just be 2 years, you know? So just make sure that you put in there, the reader knows that you know that evolution is going to at least take a couple of generations to actually show the results for it. Okay? So, all right. What else is on our list on this side? The only other thing I have hiding down there, and I kind of stick it wherever I can fit it, is what is artificial selection? Like if we're talking natural selection is when nature selects for the survivors. What is artificial? Who selects then? By humans. Right? Yeah, we are when we pick them. Right, so I have a little person drawn on my little stick figure with a little ugly dog beside it, and he's like, "What have I done?" Because that's kind of what we've done to wolves, right? They used to be all like glorious and whatever, or kind of like them, and we've changed them into little bulldogs that's teeth stick out and can't breathe and snore really loud. And it's like, wow, great job, guys. So anyway, and I have a little ugly dog too, so I don't know why we did that to those poor dogs. They were doing so well in the wild, but. Anyway, artificial selection is when we actually select things to breed together, and it changes it a lot from natural. So corn, you know, corn on the cob, like corn doesn't actually exist in nature. Like there is no wild corn. We just did that. We just decided we wanted that. Actually, just took it from grains, and I think it was the Mayans that started it, breeding them until they got like big grain heads of corn. And so there's lots of crop artificial selection. Okay, so I've got all that going. So once we've got our little speciation events and everything occurring, we get to have our old friend cladogram. I know, right? They're so lovely. They're so reassuring. When you see a cladogram on a test, you're like, thank you. I can fill this out. I know where it goes. Okay, so this is your out group. And guys, I'm going to just reiterate, I want you to write it out here. And I did circle things on your mock or whatever test it was. The last one had one of these. I circled things and I was like, put it out here, write it out here. Okay, don't put it on the line. Don't put it back here somewhere. Write it at the end of the line. And then these are your sister species here, whatever they are. They're more closely related than the out group. Oh, I was right in there. So those are your sister species. I'm going to circle the nodes. There's 2 on here. So nodes are like a speciation point. So put little arrows to them. Okay. And then this is your common ancestor. And it's dead because its line has stopped. Okay, so extinct. Okay. So that's our playground.
If we were
Yes.
writing it like the name, or I guess it'd already be there, of the ancestor, we would write it before the line.
Oh, you'd write it on probably, yeah, right before the line. But actually, I've not. They don't do
They
that.
usually put one there.
They don't, yeah, or they don't put. They just put a stick in there. I would say don't write any species back here unless you see where it specifically says, you know, this is the common ancestor. I need to write it in because otherwise they won't have you do one. Okay, they're focused on if you know the relationship between the species, not the common ancestor. So don't worry about that line unless it specifically directs you to address that line. Okay, just assume it's not addressed unless it is. Now, sometimes they'll ask you to circle the out group, okay, or identify the out group. So circle the out group. Don't circle the out group or circle the out group. Like what? Here's the group right here. Like circle the group. Like don't circle the line. It doesn't say circle the out group's line or circle the out group's junction. Like don't do that. Especially this one back here. That one's dangerous. They sometimes don't award that point because you've actually circled a part of the place where they divided. So circle the out group if they ask you to do that. Also be super, super careful to read all the instructions. Sometimes it'll say like part A, you know, whatever. And then for part B, it'll say, okay, now put all of the little species in the right spots. And then it'll go on and say, identify the out group. Well, make sure you're not so caught up in putting all the little things on that you forget to go back and identify the out group. Like you might just have to write it, you know, B and then write the name of the out group. But make sure you do. Don't circle the out group if it says identify the out group. Okay, only circle the out group if it says circle the out group. Just little things to grab points, right? Easy points to get. Don't leave them on the table by doing just some dumb little skippy over error. Okay, questions about that? All right. Oh, remember you can rotate freely on the node, right? So it doesn't matter top or bottom. They're both equally as related to this one, right? Everyone chill with that? Okay. And also I can flip the whole thing and put the out group at the top because I can rotate it on the node. Okay. All right, so with our cladograms, we either use morphological evidence or morphology. Oh, gosh. So cladograms are either morphological with body structures, etc., or they are molecular with DNA, etc. DNA and protein sequence is usually the only 2 that you'll see there. Okay, so as far as that goes, back to the fireflies. You had to draw a cladogram, or you had to, you know, put a cladogram, put everything on there correctly, and then it asked you, well, this is your cladogram, and this is cladogram for figure 4. Which one is more accurate? And you had to come up with the fact that yours used flash patterns. That is one morphological characteristic, right? Figure 4, it said in the paragraph somewhere that it used multiple morphological characteristics. So theirs was better because it was multiple, right? Yours was only one. However, many of you thought that they might have used molecular evidence with theirs because at the top on the title, it said evolutionary relatedness. Keep in mind that even though evolution is a change in the alleles in the gene pool, we will often, or we have in the past anyway, before we had super good access to DNA, we would use morphology, and it would be evidence of evolution. Okay, so that does, just because it says like evolutionary on the top doesn't mean that they use DNA for sure. So what do? cladogram, data table, I don't care what it is. If it says this cladogram is figure 4, cladogram of, evolutionary relatedness, when you are having to answer something directly about it, especially for the first time, I would say, if it says figure 4, look at the figure, look at the title, you know how to do that. Then also, before you even answer one thing, go find where it says figure 4 in the paragraph and read that. Okay, and put those two together, just those two. Like, leave out all the other crap that's written in there. It's gobs and heaps. So just be like, okay, what applies only to figure 4? And maybe make a little note by figure 4. Multiple morphological characteristics, because it said it in the paragraph. You had to go find it in the paragraph, okay? And then what wins? Here, which one's better? This one's better. So this one's your winner right here. So winner, chicken dinner. I don't know who coined that, but it's kind of annoying. Okay. All right, lastly, what time do we have? Ooh, doing good. Actually, I have two things left. Right here, we are going to talk about the really boring and horrible thing called extinctions. They're not boring to some people, just me. I'm not an extinction fan. I'm really not a geology fan, so I don't know. So what you need to know about extinctions, sometimes they are natural. Stuff just dies, meteors hit Earth, volcanoes erupt and block the sun for 25 days, stuff dies. They could be human-made. Our current one we're in right now is human. We're having a little trouble. We keep clear-cutting forests and killing a lot of insects, and we don't even really pay attention. And then we're like, oh my God, the polar bears. I'm like, okay, you eradicated like 40 species today, and you're worried about polar bears. I understand polar bears are cute and cuddly and really, really scary. But you should probably think about all the things that we're eradicating that aren't polar bears. So basically what you need to know about biology, okay, there's been a bunch of extinctions. I don't even know how many, 5 or 6, whatever. And they were back in the old days, like 3.9 billion years ago or something like that. Okay. What you need to know is when an extinction happens, it opens up a lot of environments for things to exploit, right? So extinctions lead to adaptive radiation. Okay, I'm going to draw a picture. I haven't drawn a picture in a while. I feel like I'm falling down my job. And it looks like Divergence, except, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there goes reality. Okay, there we go. So extinctions can lead to adaptive radiation, which is basically the exploitation of all this brand new, ecosystem space that's never been there before because the dinosaurs were on it. And now they're not. So the mammals just go boom and take over all these things. So we see this in the fossil record. We see all the dead things laying there because they went extinct. And then we see all of these species, just coming out of the woodwork, it seems like. So adaptive radiation. Finally, going to finish this bad boy up with evidence that evolution has occurred. Okay. Oh, hello, cord. I need you to stop being tangled and come with me. Right. So, couple of things that tell us that evolution has occurred, and one of them I just mentioned. So I usually put it right here, or if you have room underneath extinctions, because it might be a good spot, wherever you have space. But I'm going to put it up because you can see it better. So evidence. We've got fossils, and there's 3 little bullets under fossils. Okay. One of them is we're going to have to age them by the age of the rock. How do we know how old they are? Because that's important. So we can age the rock that they're in, whatever that is. And by the way, we do that in layers, So here's our little earth here. Here's our little tree. So, the oldest one's on the bottom. Yeah, like that. That says old. And that's layers of rock. I'm very good at drawing rock layers. It actually looks like a piece of lasagna, and now I'm kind of hungry. Okay, so you could also carbon date the actual fossil, which, by the way, they use carbon-14. I don't have a clue why that's in your standards. It just says that. Does it matter which isotope of carbon you carbon date fossils with? I'm pretty sure not, but whatevs. So basically what they do is they know the half-life or the decay rates of carbon-14, and so they can pull carbon-14 out of the fossils because they're carbon-based things, and they can see how much it's decayed, and they can tell how old it is. Voila. Okay. And then the other thing they can do with fossils is something else that I just forgot. Because fossils are not my jam. Oh yeah, where are they? Geography of them. Where are they located? That helps us with evolution. Helps us to see Did I spell that right? Graphene? Yeah, I think that's right. So that helps us to kind of tell where changes have happened. If they're in one space and the other, and they're like over here they look like this, and over there they look like that. We can get some little ideas there. So evidence fossils. 2 is, of course, structures. Like body structures, like homologous structures. We also sometimes call that homology. And thirdly is molecular evidence, which you know very well. Is just looking at their DNA sequences. So, and seeing if they're related to each other. So basically, what we're seeing here is that we need some evidence to show that evolution has happened. And because it happens typically so slowly, we sometimes can see it in our lifetime, because sometimes it'll happen, it'll do a little this thing and we'll be able to see it. But sometimes it's just way slower. And so we need evidences. Now, the one thing that's missing on our evidence is Hardy-Weinberg. We will do Hardy-Weinberg on Thursday with the math stuff. Okay, so we're going to spend all day on Thursday where we don't have any AP tests on Thursday. Right before the test, it's my send-off, my blessing to you. Feel so lovely as we do chi-square Hardy-Weinberg. Water potential, rates,